How does Christen Press not being on this roster compare to Megan Rapinoe being on this roster?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there's a lot of stuff that goes behind the scenes that a lot of people aren't privy to, right? And I think that probably dates back a little bit. Like, listen, I'm privy to some information and also not to all of it. And I clearly wasn't there at the Olympics, but I guarantee this has to do with a lot of stuff that goes on off the field that people don't know about, right? And so as good as Christen Press has been, I think more of this has to do with like leadership aspect and what that looks like in terms of not only your performance on the field, because in general, Christen Press is going to be more like a Mallory Pugh. And I said this from the beginning too, about what Megan can bring in terms of her play. And Vlatko said it in the media, right? His media availability today, and just the difference. Not a lot of players bring what Megan brings, whether it's 10 minutes, whether it's 30 minutes, right?
Whether it's 30 seconds to score a penalty kick at the end of a game.
Yeah. Or her first two touches, or she hits the crossbar against San Diego this weekend, right? So I think it looks very different from player to player. But I also go back to the 2015 World Cup and somebody like an Abby Wambach, who wasn't playing her best, wasn't going to get 90 minutes. Do you bring her because you know what you're going to get off on the bench, and you know how she's going to respond to being on the bench? And I think that with Megan. Right. And I think there's some internal stuff that we don't actually know with other players. And take what you want with that, with what I'm saying with that. But you can read between the lines. All right. So I think Vlatko has his reasonings, but I think that's probably what it has to do is behind the scenes chemistry, what you're going to get, how people are going to react, maybe not starting or playing as much. So, yeah.
So some people dropping in the chat, I love this, drop your information, your picks for who else could have been. Some people are saying Kristen Hamilton. We got, that's James Miller dropping a Hamilton in there. John saying Jessica McDonald's been with the USA at the World Cup, and she has the experience. She's playing for Racing Louisville right now. So just some other names popping up here, but it's a lot of the recent experience, I think, that Megan Rapinoe brings. And also Christen Press is now injured. We don't know the extent of her knee injury at this point. So despite Vlatko saying that Press was never on this roster, she's not at this point because she is injured. We don't know the extent of her knee injury. Of course, wishing her the best and that it's not too serious, and that whatever it is, it's an incredibly speedy recovery. But at this point, she's injured, and that falls into line with a number of other players. But any thoughts from you, Lori, on like a Jess McDonald, a Kristen Hamilton with Kansas City? These are just names that people are throwing into the chat. So
yeah, like they have had good. I think Kristen Hamilton's great at the NWSL level, right? Does she bring something more that's going to beat out somebody currently with our attack in the U.S. Women's National Team? No. And at this point in time, the conversation is around having a little bit of balance with the youth that have been extraordinary and a bit more veteran players on that front line, which in this case would be Megan and Alex Morgan, right? So if you're bringing in Kristen Hamilton, she has no experience at this level. So you're just adding to the inexperience of at the national team level. Jess McDonald did go to the World Cup in 2019. Barely played, though. Has been great. Love Jess and what she brings. Do I think that this is a player that the U.S. needs currently? No. I don't. And so, like, does it take anything away from her value and what she brings? This is just a different level. And we're talking about little nuances. I'm not saying that Megan Rapinoe throughout this. I mean, listen, I think sometimes this gets totally out of context and what people think. It's not like Megan Rapinoe should be playing 90 minutes starting every game. No. But the little nuances that she brings looks very different than what a Kristen Hamilton and a Jess McDonald brings. Even very different to what Christen Press. And I have been at the highest level, and in these moments, it's not just about what you bring on the field. It's about how you're bringing players together, the chemistry. A makeup of the team is not always the best 23 at any given time. It's about who can work the best together, who's going to bring that chemistry, who's going to bring the camaraderie, who knows what it takes to be there. And you know that. You get that. And somebody from Vlatko Andonovski, who was in his first major tournament last year, which would have been a real shock when it came to the Sweden game, right? There's a learning curve for Vlatko as a head coach as well back then. And also, this is the toughest position that any U.S. coach has ever been in, with Jill Ellis not nearly having to make these tough decisions, right? Because of there was a very core group that was in their prime at the time consistently. So this is like about the nuance of a conversation. It doesn't mean that Kristen Hamilton hasn't done really well. Again, love her, or Jess McDonald. But what are they bringing that's going to add, right? And so that's where the press thing is. Yeah, I am friends with Megan. Like this isn't somebody just tweeted like Lori's friends. Yeah, Ralph, I am. This isn't like, this is also like just like a common understanding of what it takes to put a rosters together as well.
Exactly.
The team isn't going to not qualify if Megan's not on that roster, if Press is, and Press wasn't injured. I'm just saying also Vlatko Andonovski would have a real understanding what some of these players would bring and what it takes at a certain time to have the best roster to get the job done.
Exactly. That it's so much of that comes down to it. And Vlatko Andonovski was very clear about that, saying, I have had conversations with Megan Rapinoe. And from my understanding with what he was saying, it was more on the lines of, yes, Megan, we need you there for what you can bring off the pitch. You're not going to start and get 90 minutes. It's more of how you can contribute and having those conversations, and Megan understanding her role has shifted on this team. And I think that's where a big part of this comes in, and that type of conversation. There are a number of other players that we're missing on this list, but we have someone very special joining our USWNT Hour live right now. Good friend, writer for CBS Sports, co-host of Attacking Third with me, Sandra Herrera is here to give her thoughts on everything that is U.S. Women's National Team, the roster that has dropped. Sandra, welcome into the show. We've talked a little bit about it. We've picked Lori's brain on these rosters.
Nice.
We were just talking about Megan Rapinoe being added to this list, but some other names that are missing, a number of them due to injury: Tierna Davidson, Lynn Williams, Katarina Macario, Sam Mewis, Tobin Heath, Abby Dahlkemper, all due to injury, not on that list.
Roster?
Yeah. Crystal Dunn, Julie Ertz, Casey Kruger out for maternity leave at this point. What were, Sandra, for you, some of the most surprising names that were not on this roster?
What up, Sandra?
What up, Lori? I couldn't wait to hop on here and chat first reactions with you about it. Honestly, I think when the news of Kat Macario came down, it just was one of those things where it was like deflating in its own unique way, where it's like a certain level of excitement that folks might have had around this competition might have got deflated a little bit, because at this point you had a number of injuries and pregnancies, right? New mamas to the team kind of come into play that we knew was going to reshape what this eventual roster was going to look like. But at the time, it was going to be a roster that maybe included a player like Macario, and then maybe some other veterans that we still had some question marks around in the air of whether or not they were going to come on. But after having some time to process that, we had chatted a lot about that here on Attacking Third. We wrote about it on CBS Sports, and I wrote about this just now about CBS Sports, and you could go check that out when you have a chance.
Plug it.
Thinking about it, I'm like, it just doesn't matter because of the player pool that is at the disposal of this USWNT coaching staff. Is it unfortunate that things like injuries and the timing of these injuries that have come into play have impacted the eventual roster that we now saw go live? Yeah, of course it's unfortunate, but is that going to be detrimental to the extent that they will fail to qualify for the World Cup? I don't think saying that is going to make me bite me in the butt, sooner down the line. You're just looking at the competition in front of them. And while we have all been in agreement that we are very enthusiastic about the direction in which CONCACAF is going, it's not a level playing field yet. It's just not. We would be liars on here if we said that this is a level playing field for all national teams in CONCACAF. It's not. There is the fact of the matter is there are teams, systems, and programs in place that are ahead of some other national teams and system and programs currently in existence. And the USWNT is the number one of those systems. They have a massive player pool. We saw it literally get expanded in front of our eyes as CONCACAF dropped the player pools that the national teams will be selecting from. And you had the USWNT drop 50 something names like it was nothing. Like it was nothing. And you're just like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. All these players, I know that name. That looks familiar. They're good. And that's just where I'm at in terms of this. The level of talent, the pipeline talent that exists right now, because the NWSL exists. Let's not forget that. I know, Lori, I would love to hear your thoughts on this a little bit, but the fact that there is a league, a consistent league now, a league that's 10 years old, we see examples of that in this roster. We see Taylor Korniak, we see Naomi Girma, players who are going to be participating mostly for the Colombia friendlies, maybe not necessarily CONCACAF, but the shout outs to Carson Pickett, Jaylene Howell. Lori, I couldn't wait to come on here and talk to you about Sam Coffey.
Yeah,
I love to see it. I love to see it. These are a number of first-year players getting their shot at the pro level in NWSL this year in 2022. So you have this combination of players who have some experience in youth teams, whether they're U20s or U15s and so on and so forth. So this combination of youth teams and now this added element and experience of constant and consistent play in NWSL, it's almost unfair to think about when you're looking at the competition that they're going to be going up against. Jamaica doesn't have, a women's professional league for their players to go out there. Canada, their players have talked about that. They have their players within NWSL right now. And Mexico is a country that finally got on board with forming their their women's professional league, but that is a league that's still very, very young, about as young as NWSL. So the level of talent that the coaching staff has at their disposal to sort of name a roster like this, I looked at all the names on it and said, this is a team that can absolutely go out there and clinch a qualifying spot, period. Even without name, even if they decided to not take Megan Rapinoe, which they're taking her, and that's fine. Whether they decided to take her or not, guess what? They're going to be okay.
We're gonna take her no matter what.
I mean, I think those are great. I think that's a great way to look at it too, Sandra. And just in terms of, this isn't an equal playing field, and we've said that, right? Like, we know the depth of this. I also think that when you're thinking of this roster of 23, and like as Lisa and I mentioned a little bit ago, 14 of these players have never played in a world championship, then there's good balance in this, right? There's good balance in this group in terms of understanding what it takes at these level, but then also getting a lot of these younger players that have done really well experience at what it takes to get it done. Does that mean missing a few of these players, as you pointed out, Sandra? They wouldn't? No. I mean, at this point in time, the expectation is you qualify, and that should be the case, right? That doesn't mean you take any games lightly, because we've seen it go the other way as well, but you prepare the exact same. But I'm actually a fan of this. I think this could look different, just the amount of injuries going into the actual World Cup, gathering that we do qualify. This could look very different. If people are back, right? I mean, even some of the players we just mentioned that are out, that's a whole nother roster.
Exactly.
So it's wild.